Right, Dan Greef, you are the Labour candidate for South Cambridgeshire. Tell me a bit about yourself. What's your connection to the area?
Yes, so I moved to this area in 2012, to Cambridge City, and then I moved to the area of Queen Edith's, which is part of South Cambridgeshire, but in the city. And then I stood for the local election. I was a candidate for one of those elections, but I'd met my wife here. She was actually in the Labour Party as well. And yeah, we then had a family here, settled. I came here originally to teach, and she was a doctor in Addenbrooke's, and we work and live in the area, just outside Coton.
And I should say this is the third of the South Cambridgeshire interviews I'm doing. All three were supposed to be in the home of the candidate. This is the third interview, the third
Yeah,
time
I noticed that.
In the home of the candidate. Just briefly tell me, where are we today?
Yeah, so this place where we are now, right, this is my in-laws' house in Camborne. So we live just off Maddenley Road, on the other side of the M11, just outside Coton, so about 200 metres from South Cambs. But because this is where we're staying for the next couple of weeks, because we have very young children, my in-laws have been amazing and they've helped us with the children. And equally, this is kind of the campaign headquarters. I don't think my mother-in-law loves that all the time, but it's where we get our activists in, it's where we do our campaign from.
But you technically live just outside of the
Yeah, just outside, yeah, in the city, yeah.
Okay.
Just outside, I even walked to the park in Coton with my daughter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we'll start with Brexit, because it has been such a kind of key part of your campaign. So briefly speaking, what is your Brexit position?
Yep, so I'm a Remainer. I have been since 2016, well, since the referendum was called and before then as well. And the last 3 years, I've just seen what's happening with the government and its inability to negotiate with itself. And I think at the moment, the right course is a people's vote with Remain as an option on the ballot paper.
So just specifically, are you talking the sort of Labour policy of Labour takes power, presumably, if you win a majority, Labour negotiates a new deal with Europe, and then that's put in a second referendum, Remain versus the Labour deal?
Yeah, well, that term deal, I think, gets used a lot. So it'd be a transition arrangement by the Labour Party initially, and then what would happen is we would then have already put in place how we'd have a customs union with the European Union and access to the single market. So that would be what the deal would be, which would be far less complicated than the free trade deal that Trump's and Boris Johnson are talking about. And then the other side, which is what I will campaign for, is Remain, because I still think that Remain will be the best option for this area, for this country.
Can I ask you, because you campaign for Remain, the Labour Party is really pitching itself more as a Remain party. There's been sort of, the tough questions, people pushing Corbyn to come down one side or the other. But we know Corbyn did campaign for Remain in 2016. Do you think if Labour negotiates a deal, puts it to the electorate, either way it comes out, do you think that the Brexiteer faction of the electorate, that sort of Boris Johnson led, Rees-Mogg, Dominic Raab, do you think that they will believe they have a real choice?
I understand, and I think this is the conversation we have to have, because in 2016 it was never known what the terms of leaving was. So for instance, Nigel Farage was talking about a Norwegian style arrangement, which is far more in the European Union than what he would be saying now. And I think we're saying to people, we would be out of the treaties of the EU, we wouldn't be members of the EU in that deal, but at the same time we would still have access to the market.
I accept that the original 2016 referendum had the specific terms of EU membership, which we're sort of currently on, and then a sort of negation of that we want something else, we want to be out of the EU, but that can be done in a number of ways.
Yeah.
And often you hear people arguing on the Remain side, on sort of your side as it were, that actually a confirmatory vote would mean we'd put some concrete proposals before people, so they'd have that choice now.
Exactly.
In a different way to perhaps 2016, where there was more unknowns on one side of it. Would you, again, it seems hard to believe that 52% that voted for the Brexit in 2016 are going to be satisfied with the choice of Labour's Brexit versus Remain. And before you sort of come back in on that, you could make that argument presumably for any kind of specific Brexit, because that 52% cannot necessarily, all be said to fall in line behind one specific version. But of course, we have the Brexit leaders, as it were, Boris Johnson, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Dominic Raab, they're behind the Boris Johnson Brexit deal. Are you not at risk of just creating more division by offering people a false choice, as it were, and then saying that's the issue?
It's not a false choice, but I can see where you're coming from, and I'll answer that with an example, okay? But before I do, I wanted to talk about the bloc of the 52, because that bloc of people, of course, is quite a diverse set of reasons as to why they voted Brexit. There will be some people in that bloc who would literally want a free trade or no deal scenario. It's going to be very hard to win those people over, and I appreciate that. But what I would say is, I was talking to a guy here in Camborne recently who's a Brexiteer, and he himself works for a company on a 0-hours contract. He wants to leave and all the rest of it, but I skip to my point. And he said that he wants democracy fulfilled from 2016. When I explained to him that actually he needs a fairer deal in terms of how his country treats him, but equally how would he like a people's vote, where he could still vote for an option which would be leaving, but at least his job would be secure, he was quite happy with that. And I think that as a way to try to get rid of the tension and to try to de-escalate things, a piece of democracy there would actually really help heal that divide. Because he said to me that in that situation,
why not versus the referendum, Remain versus the Prime Minister's deal, the Boris Johnson deal, which we know has the bona fides of being a sort of Brexiteer deal. Now, I take the points put by yourself and people on your side of the argument that 52 can be split any number of ways, and no one really knows where within that the numbers lie. But that campaign was led by Boris Johnson, Michael Gove, with key characters, Dominic Raab, the people in the Conservative cabinet who are now supporting that deal. You would be effectively taking away that deal. I mean, people say that Liberal Democrats, revoke is undemocratic.
Well, it is clearly, yeah.
If they won a majority, though, they're saying if we win an election, we would get rid of it. But you, in your case, you're not even saying in an election you would get rid of Brexit. You revoke Article 50. You're saying if you win a majority, you will offer this choice to the people. And I suppose what I'm putting to you is, can you honestly say that a significant section of the majority and not of that 52% are not going to be very unhappy with the choice? I mean, how will they not feel like they can't vote for either of them?
Okay, so Boris Johnson's deal, firstly, puts a border down the Irish Sea. So clearly,
it's not about what the positives and negatives of his deal are, though, is it? It's about who he is and what.
I think it is actually. I disagree with that point. I think it is actually. If you have a deal which breaks up the union of the country, I don't think that's a deal we can have. Hang on. Why is it then that Boris Johnson went against Theresa May's deal, and this is the right wing of the Tory party fighting in itself, stopping Brexit so far? So, okay, is it Theresa May's deal which is real Brexit? Is it Boris Johnson's deal which is real Brexit?
Well, hold on a second. I take your point on the difficulties of knowing. As we've already said, it's impossible to know what that initial Brexit referendum truly meant, as you say.
Yeah, what's the mandate? What does it mean in terms of delivery?
But do you see that there's a difference, isn't there, between saying the difference between Theresa May's Brexit and Boris Johnson's Brexit? Boris Johnson's Brexit has him at the head of it, as it were, and all the other key players. It's the only one that has been given sort of some serious support by Parliament. And what you're asking is to take that away and put in Labour's Brexit deal. If there's a natural Brexiteer, as it were, if such a thing exists, might just say this is Remain versus Remain.
But if you're trying to say to them, this will be leaving in every legal sense that you want to leave.
But why that technical argument does not stand up to
But let's look at what happened last time. Let's look at what happened last time. We had a Remain campaign, which was really negative, talking about how you're going to be in more trouble in the future. We also had on the other side a Leave campaign saying that things would be much better if we left the European Union. If we say to people in a very positive way, right, let's invest in schools, let's invest in hospitals, the country will be better off under this deal than, for instance, no deal, or a free trade deal with America, which I honestly believe would be putting a lot of our services at risk, in particular the NHS, and TTIP's been talking about again, which gives access to American firms to come in, and that worries me. So I would always stand up for the best for the constituents.
I understand. So
can I just say, hang on, we have to win arguments. We have to make sure we win the argument with people to show them how they would be better off. And if we don't try and win the argument for Remain, if we don't try and win the argument to try and show people would be better off with this deal, then we have let them down. We can't just be leading. We can't just be following. Sorry, we've got to lead the argument. Definitely.
I understand. So, still on the Brexit topic, there's one candidate standing for the Brexit position in this constituency. And then there's two of you, as it were, on the supposed Remain side. Now, I'd imagine you both slightly... yes.
There was just two of us at one point. There was Anthony and me standing when Heidi Allen stood down. So there was just one Remain candidate, one Leave candidate.
So there's two candidates. There's the Liberal Democrats and Labour. Now, I'd imagine each party might not necessarily like being categorised in the same way as a Remain party.
I think he's right to in many ways, because this is a Brexit election.
So do you probably know what I'm going to ask you then, which is about
splitting the vote.
Splitting the Remain vote. I think a lot of people want to know. All the polls suggest. I'll take what you've said in the past when asked about this at the hustings I've been to, is that effectively people who feel very strongly for Remain, and it's a sort of one issue Brexit for one issue
election for them.
Issue election for them. They have asked why not sort of stand aside for him, or why split the votes like this, because all other issues aside, we know that is sort of by definition what it is doing. I appreciate you have said in response that you came second in the last election in 2017, although what I would
15.
say and 15, although if you do look at the figures for that, it was a significant margin, sort of 3-1. Heidi Allen's beat you by. But the polls
and I came significantly above the Liberal Democrats.
But the polls currently show that the Liberal Democrats are it's sort of a two-horse race according to that big YouGov model that went out between the Liberal Democrats and Conservative. I checked the odds this morning; they're saying the same thing. Do you feel a sense of worry that you might be splitting the vote when Brexit, a second referendum, has been so key to your campaign?
Okay. So, say for instance, in that scenario, how are we going to get people's vote? That's a key question. We have to have a Labour government to get people's vote, because the Liberal Democrats will not be able to deliver there.
If you accept, because you're right to say that Ian Solomon himself has said who is your Liberal Democrat rival in this seat, has said he said it's a reasonable assumption that his party won't win a majority. And again, the sort of polling, and I think most people agree, the general field does lend itself to that. In this particular seat, however, because that's a national argument, isn't it? To say the Labour Party is the largest and most likely of the second referendum parties to win a majority. But in this particular seat, it's not necessarily the case that you're the strongest.
Well, let me explain that I am. So, okay, I'm not only going back on previous records where I came a very strong second, and what we saw from 2010 to 2017 is a massive increase of Labour vote by, I think it was like 10,000 or so in that time, 11,000. And what we're seeing is that people in this constituency, the demographic is changing. People want to vote for Labour more than they want to vote for Liberal Democrat. The question is, will they vote tactically or not? And this is how our campaigns are different.
Is there any evidence that people want to vote more for Labour than they do for
Well, certainly from our campaigning, we are a canvassing party.
So the Liberal Democrats have a majority on the council, which they won at the last council election.
From what I know from the doorstep...
The polling shows, but your anecdotes aside...
it's not, it's data. It's data collection we do on the doorstep. We know what people are thinking because we do canvassing.
But the best data that's available to everyone and hasn't been acquired by Labour Party activists, which I think we can all agree is probably not going to be accepted by the others in this as
I can appreciate how they would say that.
Yeah, so the best data available to sort of objective observer would show that the Liberal Democrats are the larger, considerably larger second referendum party here. And regardless of the argument, even if you say the argument is strongly in your favour that Labour will do quite well, and I'm sure that Liberal Democrats will say the same of themselves, between the two of you, you are still going to be splitting the votes, even if you both do very well. If anything, the better you do, presumably, both parties, the more you split that Remain vote.
So that's the thing. When it comes down to data then, if that's what you want to talk about, if you look at electoral calculus from even yesterday, things are definitely swinging now the other way, which is interesting. And we did face this before, to be fair. So I've done this. I've been in 2017 and 15. You got the kind of polls saying one thing. Hang on, let me just answer this question, Ben. We got the polls saying one thing. They very much were saying that you've got to vote one way or the other, or you have to try and be a tactical vote. And what we then saw is it completely went the other direction. And a lot of people in 2017 were annoyed they voted Lib Dem when I came second, because they said, well, I only did it tactically, splitting the vote even more so. When people actually vote for the party they want to win the election, which is I think what 2017 you saw happen, that's when you get this massive difference with the Labour vote going up. And I honestly think, now the election hasn't happened yet, there have been a lot of polls manipulating voters to voting one way or the other. There have been leaflets going out saying this party's got no chance here, or, you know, believe me, I'm a Lib Dem councillor and I've done some polling and I say this, that and the other. That is manipulation of voters on the other side as well. The election has not happened until next week, and when it does,
when the election happens, it will be too late, presumably, for the Remain parties to sort of get their act together, as it were.
Well, they have in a way, and what we've done is we've gained many Green voters from that. So what's happened so far is
through the Unite to Remain with the Liberal Democrats. So
and what happened is
the Green Party
members and voters have contacted me to say that our Green New Deal is what they're going to support. They can't support the Lib Dems.
You're saying people have contacted you. That's unverifiable, as you know.
Well, we've got hundreds of people who contacted us.
What we're saying there, though, is that there is a Unite to Remain, a deliberate second referendum campaign that has picked out your rival, Ian Sollom, as the sort of Remain second referendum candidate, not you. Presumably that just lends itself to the argument going the other way, that actually...
But it hasn't. I mean, okay, so you might say you don't believe what I'm saying, and that's your
I'm not saying I don't believe it. I think, as you will fully
we have been told many times by Green voters they are supporting the Labour Party.
That's unverifiable from any for a voter, for an objective assessor, for a reporter. You can say that and make the argument, but I suppose objectively it looks on paper. I can see that you sort of
looks on paper. I completely agree. But Ben, this is the difference. I have been here before, so I've seen this happen.
But you've never won.
2017.
You say you've been
not
here
yet.
Before, but you've
not
lost
yet.
The seat.
But hang on a minute. If you look at where we were in 2010 and what happened over 2015, 2017, there is a huge rise. And you might say you don't like this, you don't agree with it. But I have heard people say they'll vote one party for local elections. It's not the same as the national, and we would be really foolish to say that. And the Liberal Democrat offer. Let
me ask you this: is your progress, your career, as it were, in the Labour Party more important to you than winning a second referendum?
No, not at all. We've got to remain in the European Union. I'm putting everything into that, and I think that's important.
But would you accept that even whether or not it should be you or the other candidate, would you accept the biggest thing you could do to prevent the Tories winning this seat, to get a second referendum candidate in, would be for you to step aside and endorse?
Let me explain.
But do you just understand that point?
I hear what you're saying.
Would you accept that math? That's the maths would lend itself.
No, I do not accept it. I do not accept it at all. And the calculus is showing there's been a change. So your poll there is kind of was reflective of what the Liberal Democrats are doing nationally. However,
it would have to be a very
the national pitch for the Lib Dems is very low right now, and they know that. That's why they had to do that poll.
Hold on a second, that wasn't their poll, it was you guys. Now you would.
I know they did their own poll. Sorry, that's what I meant.
Yeah, the biggest poll model, most reliable model, seems to show that at the moment the Lib Dems are way out in front.
A week ago.
Yeah,
not at the moment. A week ago.
But it would have to be a very big swing for you. Wouldn't
That's what we do.
But you didn't win the last election. You didn't win this last seat.
Time. I didn't win the seat last time. However, Heidi Allen leaving is a big part of this. I think
last time Heidi Allen got 34,000 votes. You got about 18,000 votes.
Yeah, and the Lib Dems.
It's a very big swing.
Yes, but so you're saying the Lib Dems are going to come from 12 to then over like 30,000.
That's what the polling, I suppose. I'm not saying whether or not they'll win.
I can't see it happening.
Okay, so you reject the...
And the question is, Ben, what's going to happen to the Remain Conservative vote? And this is anecdotal maybe, but this is what we're picking up from people. They do not like the Labour Party, but they do want people's vote. And there are business people who have said to me, as long as we can remain in the European Union, economically that is way better for our country than any government choice they're making right now. And they have said to me, apart from they like some elements of their manifesto, that they want to make sure they vote for Remain, and Labour's the only party who can do that.
Nationally, you're arguing.
Nationally, exactly. And when they look at the last election result, when they look at the last election result, they think that I'm the person who can do it. Now, if it was another Labour candidate, it's tricky, an argument. But I am the same candidate. I've got name recognition. They know who I am. They know, of course, my campaign.
Let's move it off.
But can I just say something about that as well? Because don't forget, and the general election is about other issues as well. I think the Liberal Democrats want to go back to 2016 and carry on as if the referendum didn't happen. We, on the other hand, are actually putting up a credible option for government for everybody. And it's not just Brexit,
I understand
it's the other issues that you're going to ask me about now.
I understand, there's other issues. I'm not going to ask you about those just yet. What I'm going to ask you about is some comments you made just as the election was breaking out. At the Cambridge Stays rally, just before the election started, you described Anthony Brown, your Conservative rival, as an existential problem. You said you'd stand up to racism, effectively implying that he'd made racist comments in the past and that you were sort of calling him out on it, I think it's fair to say. You then haven't sort of since mentioned that at the hustings I've been to, looked at your sort of social media feed. Do you sort of regret describing him as an existential problem in that way?
Right, it's an existential problem. Let me just talk about what I meant by that. So, firstly, he talked about
we don't need to go into
I'm not going into his articles about other things.
I'm just saying.
But he talked about no deal. He talked about no deal firstly. That is, I think, existential, because that is a question about our relationship.
So it's not.
And, no, I'm going to explain. And then secondly, I think the comments he had made in the past have set an agenda in the media, and that worries me. So I was referring to his comments about other issues as well.
Because you've been quite strong, you were very strong in your criticism straight away of him, and it seemed like you were going to make some strong criticisms of those comments he'd made, and
which I did,
which you did at that time, but you've since had many opportunities where hustings to make the arguments where you haven't, and I think.
Let me explain.
Hold on a second. The other thing that happened was that the Order website wrote an article on you. Basically, they'd taken comments you'd made on social media, largely to do with your sort of beliefs on Israel and Palestine, I think.
Well, it's not largely. There's lots of comments.
And some other comments they'd picked out. I mean, did you sort of draw back from criticism of Anthony
not at all,
because you were worried about
what happens is
at
the beginning of the campaign I did call out those comments, but I always make a positive campaign when I'm running as a candidate, so those things need to be said
2 days later. So you said it
no I didn't. Hang on, I did say things afterwards in the campaign, but what I'm saying is I campaign on how this country can be a better place. I try to campaign on things like the NHS, on schools, the issues that really matter. And if we are just going to be in a campaign mudslinging each other, I think that doesn't do anyone, as in the public, any favours. So, of course, I did address the issues. He wrote comments in a newspaper, which I think has set the tone in the country.
I understand.
And I think that's right to say.
I've put those criticisms to you.
Yes, you have. But I'm saying my point of view. And what I'm saying is that I then think from there on in, we address the questions asked in hustings, honestly, as best we can, and I will not mudsling at anybody in that situation.
Let me move on to the last thing on the anti-Semitism debate, because
definitely this is a really important question.
At a national level, obviously it's been a big part of the conversation around the Labour Party. You spoke at the Homerton hustings that I attended. You said you were put to it whether or not asked to defend effectively the Labour anti-Semitism.
Well, I think the question was why should I vote?
Why? Yes,
Labour?
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Apologies, you're absolutely right. So you said in response, you said in terms of the Labour Party, if there is a case of anti-Semitism, it should be dealt with as soon as possible. You did give some examples of where you felt that happened. You then said we have to personally take responsibility for what we say, and if we do get it wrong, say sorry. And where I have got it wrong in the past, I say sorry too.
Yes. So
what are you referring to? Do you believe that you've made anti-Semitic?
I have not made anti-Semitic comments.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is we are all responsible for what we put online. And effectively it's like publishing. And you have to think not only the meaning behind what you're saying, but the reason. I think it's fair to say that.
Yeah, okay. So you were not accepting a criticism made of you that some of those remarks you'd made online were anti-Semitic?
They were not.
Okay. So let's move on to local issues.
Yep, sure.
I'll let you kick us off. What do you think are the big local issues?
Okay, so Sure Start Centres. It's something that we saw in the last 2 years. Many of them closed around the area. That is a huge issue. I think it's something I appreciate because my children are young and I have been to many, especially as a stay-at-home dad with my daughter for a year. And I just honestly think that the issue I raised with the Conservative County Council here was, why did they give themselves an allowance increase while they cut the funding to Short Start Centres? I think that's disgraceful.
So Short Start Centres.
That's one issue, of course. How many?
Some further local issues? What?
Yep, so that's one of them. I think the second big local issue here is to do with housing, not just, of course, location, but it's to do things where, like, how does housing get built in a way that's both net zero carbon, and equally how do you work with water in our situation, because we know that in this local area there's a huge problem with chalk rivers and the aquifer, so that's a big ecological crisis.
Your Conservative rival for this seat, Anthony Brown, he's talked about overdevelopment, and he's made that a big part of his campaign. There is a fast pace of development, isn't there, in South Cambridgeshire? Where do you stand on that? Do you think too much development at the moment, not enough?
Okay, so in terms of the local plan, they have a statutory obligation to deliver the housing that comes from central government, but I think that's a good thing. In many ways, we do have more housing.
But hold on, leave aside the sort of mechanics of it and why it's happening and how it's happening. I mean, just
is it a good thing? I think it is a good thing. Yes, I think we need more housing.
With the pace of development?
Because
hold on a second. Would you want it to then speed up?
I think at the moment we have an ambitious plan in this area, which is really positive, and I think it's a generational question.
But we're currently working the Greater Cambridge local plan between Cambridge City Council and South Cambridgeshire District Council is just kicking off now.
Yep.
There'll be consultations in January where households will sort of find that it becomes a bigger issue. Should be due to be completed by 2023, and I believe I'm right in saying it takes us up to about 2040. In terms of the plan. So we're at the stage now where we're setting a new plan. So are you saying you'd like to see development actually increase even faster?
I think there is a housing crisis, and so we need more housing, yes.
So yes, you want
to
see... Hold on a second, can I just... So you would like to see the pace of development in South Cambridgeshire increase?
I think it's at the right level now, to be honest, because it is above statutory obligation by about 4,000. So I think that's okay.
Statutory, my understanding of it
19, isn't it?
So it's about 19,500 they're due to
be
completed
23, I think it is.
By 2031, and yes, you're right, it's the rate is due to be about 20% over that, I think, based on current council forecasts. However, the pace of development, the minimum baseline is set to increase slightly, so there is a chance we could see more. But I suppose, just very firmly, I think you've answered clearly now. So
I think it's good to keep where we're going.
Pace.
Yes.
And can I just push you, because on the last 5 years we've had, and the next 5 years are very different. So which pace are you referring to there?
Oh, I think, what we have now with the development we've seen the last 5 years, and that increase, I think we need to keep going at that level, because it's a generational crisis.
Keep going with the increase, or
keep going with the increase, because we have, of course, lots of young people who can't afford homes locally, and there are brownfield sites still. So, for instance, North Stowe.
Okay, well, now that you let me ask you, building in the green belt,
I'm really against that if we can at all costs, because I think there are enough.
Do you think that you don't think there's a need for it?
I don't think there's a need for it, because there are brownfield sites first. So we've always said, and this is what John Healy's made the argument, that we would make sure we build on brownfield sites as much as we possibly can.
So I think South Cambridgeshire District Council officer said last year that we're basically out of brownfield sites in South Cambridgeshire.
Well, if we run out completely, which I don't think that we're quite a long way from that still, there are parts of villages that can be still developed, which is for sure. But I think it's the last resort is the greenbelt. And if we're out of brownfield sites. Well, in that scenario, let's just answer that point. If we
which
got
is
to the
the
point,
scenario we're in.
If we get to the point where we're completely out, where we're not actually at the moment. Then I think you have to talk very closely to the communities in the Greenbelt, because if they're not on board, then we have a problem.
So when you say talk to them, you're saying actually yes.
I'm not talking about non-consultation, I'm talking about real dialogue, because what happens is those people, of course, have housing put next door to them, whatever, in the Greenbelt, and we're trying to say that as a very last resort.
Because
local planning has to be a local conversation.
That you're happy with. So you're saying you are happy in
theory. Because you can go further out.
I see what you're saying.
You can go further out. And equally, better infrastructure and transport, that's got to be part of the solution. It's not just housing with cars, that is a problem. It's got to be better infrastructure as well.
If I've understood you correctly, you're saying you're happy to see development on the Greenbelt so long as that local community is on board. But isn't that...
Only as a last resort.
Yeah, I understand. So...
I see what you did there. That's very good. I like the way you sort of said that. Yeah.
But it's the measuring people's consent, obviously. That can be a challenge. But
it can be.
And we'll move on.
And two things. It's not just the people who are loudest, of course their opinions count, it's everybody. And actually a real consultation, I think, is going in some ways door to door, and as a party we can do that, talking to people, but it's trying to get as many opportunities for real listening to the public.
We're going to move on because we're almost out of time.
Okay.
So just a quick fire round. I appreciate you would want to give a bigger description, but are you able to just give me some other local issues, just one or two? Are there any other key ones I haven't asked you about that are...
I think, transport of course is a big issue around here, and I think we need to have light rail put in wherever we can, and also a proper plan. Are you for the
northern or southern route for East-West Rail?
Northern. I'd go northern, Camborne. I think that's the best solution.
Okay, so
because it takes an hour to get into town by bus from here.
Infrastructure, sure starts, and
GPs. I mean, GP surgeries
okay.
are really struggling right now.
Let me finish up by talking about your party slogan, which you have. I know you use, and it's a key one for
the many,
party.
not the few. Yep.
For the many, not the few. Is it potentially quite divisive to tell a section of the electorate you're going into government not for them?
It's honest, and this is what I think the right isn't honest about. In the past, there's been far too few people with too much of control.
You're
over
honestly
society.
saying you're going into government not for a certain section, rather than that.
We are going in
usual
for a fair society.
everyone.
We're going for a fair
But
society.
you're saying not. You're not
Because,
saying.
hang on.
Your slogan is not for the many. It's for the many, not the few.
So,
it's quite rare for a government to go into power, or for someone to.
Well, to be honest,
for a party to attempt to get into government.
it's rare for a party to be honest, because the right wing will go in there
Is
and
that
because they generally serve, I think, the establishment, which is the same. Okay, journalists, politicians, there's this revolving door, as we know, close to home as well, where people set the agenda, people then get into Parliament and fulfil what they've set as the agenda. And what we're saying is we're going to take the people with us into government as well. We're going to be there to make sure the majority don't get ripped off in this country, as they have for the last 9 years.
You accept that it's divisive, potentially even
No, it's not divisive. It's trying to readdress an
honest.
imbalance. It's honestly trying to readdress an
we're
imbalance.
not getting into government for a certain section of the electorate. You're not going to try and... You're deliberately not going to try and represent everyone.
Right, it's not okay. I see the way you phrased that, and I can see your point.
Well,
what we're trying to say,
what
we're trying to say is, we have an imbalance. We have an imbalance in society, and we need to make sure that we are there for the people of this country who've been let down.
I think,
and that means
I take your
the
point
few
about
will have to pay more tax.
I take your point, but
they should be honoured to pay more tax. It's a privilege for society.
I understand the point that you're saying, but it's the tone, isn't it? There's a difference between saying...
I can appreciate what you're saying.
There's a difference between saying for the many, which would imply...
Not the few.
But I think it's the tone, and do you see why people might be worried? This is quite a wealthy area in
I see your
ways.
point. I get what you mean, Ben. And
do you think
say...
people should be worried that you're coming into government saying we're not going to govern for you? Because governments...
I know, we'll govern for everyone. Right, this is why I put it. I've got a small business, okay? I've only set it up the last year and a bit. It's a start-up, not yet a stay-up. But anyway, and in that situation, I want an entrepreneurial society which has business at its heart, but it's fairer. That's it.
I promised you that would be the last one. But
I'm enjoying this now. Bring it on.
Break my promise very quickly, just because there's a certain... The left, as the right, Labour as Conservative, as Liberal Democrats as well, I'm sure, they describe themselves as broad churches, and in Labour, nationalisation, public ownership over parts of the economy. Can you just very briefly, because we are really out of time, can you just say very briefly what's your attitude towards nationalising utilities?
I'm for it, because I think it would be...
Can you give me some examples?
Yeah, so, okay, like, for instance, water, electricity, so rail, for instance. I think these things would be much more better run, make profit, which goes back into the service, and give a better deal to people as well.
All right, okay. Thank you so much for your time.
Cheers, Ben.